Hey guys, this is part 2 of how to build a web application in .NET MVC on top of C#. So in the first tutorial I basically showed you how to set everything up. In this tutorial what I'm going to do is basically go through the folder structure and sort of explain at a high level what everything does. So in .NET you have what's called the solution, and the solution can contain multiple projects. Just think of a solution like a combination of things that make something work, just like in anything else. That's basically, in this aspect, we just have one project under one solution. That's really all we need to do a full-fledged web application. So just going sort of top down, I don't want to get too advanced here because for beginners this is just, how do I go from using Cold Fusion or some other like PHP or something like that getting into .NET. I want to learn how to get up and running quickly, and then we can cover the other detailed advanced features later. Properties you won't really do a whole lot with. One thing I like to go ahead and do in there is go to web and default to blank, so it just defaults to my local host. Visual Studio, when you debug or when you create a project, it'll actually assign a port number to localhost off of ISS Express and run the project that way. The difference in this platform versus things like PHP, Cold Fusion, and everything is that .NET compiles all the code into a bin folder. So anything you create, like controllers and or methods, things like that, they all get compiled, and then everything has to build and compile before it can actually run. And again, we will go into more detail about that later. But right now, I just want to be able to show you how to get up and running and get a website out there. So default that to specific page. Just leave it blank, and you're just going to hit Control S and save that. And we're going to go on down the list here. So references. This is big. References, if you're not used to this, in a nutshell, it's sort of like, the best way to describe it, or includes to the project for resources that you need in order to do things. I guess that's the best way I could describe it. You've got things for login, security, JSON, parsing, all kinds of cool helpers and extension methods and things like that. So just, down the road we'll get into how you add a reference, and if there's like Angular, things like that, or not Angular, that's probably not a good one, but there's some other libraries that I'll show you how you can add that in. App data folder would be like if you do a local database or something like that, that would get stored in there. App start, there's a lot of things in here that happen. You've got your route configurations, which basically when you go out to a web page, it controls what needs to be passed in the URL in order to actually get to a view, part of the MVC framework. Bundles are basically how you access certain things like your CSS and your scripts. You can exclude, include, do certain things in here, and then at runtime it will compile and minimize these bundles or minify them and help with resource management, so to speak. I won't get into too much more of this stuff right now. One thing I do want to mention is the web API route handler. This is specific to when we use a web API or for CRUD operations, and if you're not familiar with that, you can look in more detail with that. Jumping right back, here's our bin folder. This is where everything gets compiled. Basically all our dependencies get compiled here, as well as anything that we've built in the project controller wise. Content, this is where all your CSS and stuff will go, essentially. Some people prefer to put their image folder down in here and all that kind of stuff. I don't. What I typically do right off the bat is go in here, do add new folder, images. Go ahead and get that ready. Models, this is huge. Let's go to account view model. This is where all your properties get set. And for those of you who have not dealt with MVC framework, model is just, it's everything with MVC framework. Models keep your data structured. It's sort of like a house plan to building a house or to architecture. You got to have it. So especially if you want it to be concise and accurate. Object folder, I don't even want to get into that right now because this is something you will never even look into, and the reason why it looks like this is because it is not included in the project. One thing to note is that if you add a folder and it's dotted out or grayed out like this, you want to right click on it and make sure you do include in project. This one says exclude. See what happens. Now when I compile or push to the server, this won't be included. So I do want to make sure my images folder is included. Jumping down to scripts, these are all our scripts right now. By default we've got Bootstrap, which is Twitter Bootstrap. I'm going to go into a lot of detail about that later on because that is priceless for using responsive layout and things like that. We've got jQuery, Validate, and Modernizer, and Respond.js, which actually goes with Bootstrap. And then the big thing are our views. So whenever we go out to a home page, if I go out here and we're going to do start without debugging because we're not really trying to work with any C# code right now, and it'll be a little faster to get started. So I'm going to go out here, pull up my web app. What you'll notice is out of the box you get what are called friendly URLs, home about, instead of what you would normally see, which would probably be about.c or about.html, like that. Friendly URLs are huge for SEO and things like that, and again we will get into more detail about that, and we'll talk about how these views get rendered as part of that route configuration and so on. Typically what you want to try to do for good folder structuring is keep your views in areas that they belong. For example, you have account related things, everything should be in here, like forgot password, login, register. Visual Studio does all this stuff out of the box. It actually creates a mechanism with full-blown authentication so you don't have to build that yourself, which is really nice. The home, just like I said, starts out with about, contact, index. Manage is when you get into managing things about your account. And shared, this is your layout. This is the biggest aspect of all the views. This is the main layout, and everything gets rendered right here. So if you're not familiar with it, I'm sure you've heard of includes and things like that in websites. Back in the Cold Fusion world, we did what were called includes using CF include tag, and basically you would create a layout, and then for every page you would use that one layout, and you would include the contents of the particular page. For example, if I open up contact, this is all I have in here. I don't need to re-render that entire layout every time I need to open up a page. So what .NET does is basically goes out and renders a partial view through a controller and renders up with the layout everything that I need right here. And what makes that possible is you've got a view start page that says, hey, when this application loads, we want to use this as the layout, which points to view shared layout, which is here. And you've got all the bells and whistles that you need in here, again, to get started, everything included in your head. You've got your body with some simple nav stuff, and so on and so forth. Down at the bottom, it's important, you always want to load your libraries and things unless you absolutely need them for some crazy reason, which you usually don't. You want to load all this stuff down at the bottom. Right now we're getting jQuery and Bootstrap, and then we have render section scripts, which again I will go into detail later. Just to recap, we've gone through all the folder structuring. We will go a little bit deeper level of that once we get into doing some neat tweaks on the application. I do want to go back and show you one cool thing here. I'm using Google Chrome. If I do Control-Shift-I, apparently my keyboard's not working right now. Control-Shift-I. Here's our console view, and again, I don't want to insult anybody's intelligence, but I'm just going to go through this like I would anything else. The cool thing about this is I can actually see how the responsive layout works, and if you notice, what happened here is Bootstrap automatically changed this to a nav menu, which is really cool. Now, one thing I don't like about this nav menu is on a mobile, typically when you click it, if you're in a single page application view, it won't collapse, but because we're actually going to different pages now, it just sort of goes away. When we get further down the road, we're going to convert this entire application to a single page application using Angular, and that's where things get really cool. So thanks for watching. That was part 2. Part 3, we're going to get into actually modifying some things and digging in deeper into like login and registering and things like that. See you on the next round.